Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast, where we're about to wrap up our big question series. Should the Knicks extend Immanuel Quickley? How about Obi Toppin? And do you remember the name Rokas Jokubiatis? We do. We'll tell you why you should too. Right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, and we wanted to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. And we wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because I would make you an everydayer and in turn one of my best friends. And a reminder that if you want to be an everydayer, or even if it's just an aspiration, that means the same thing. You can subscribe on YouTube or hit that notifications bell so you never miss an episode. You can find us on the audio side, wherever podcasts can be found, and subscribe there as well. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin, Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. He is Alex Wolfe, editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. And Alex, we are wrapping up our big question series, and we start with a painful one for me, because the downside of this question is that Immanuel Quickley won't be in my life anymore, but I'll ask you, and I'll ask you to be objective about it as much as you can. How much do you pay IQ, or do you let him hit restricted free agency in a year, see what he does this season, and risk paying him more? Or if he doesn't improve that much, maybe get him for a steal.
I go back and forth on this. It's so tough because I like this year's postseason. I was really hoping to see more out of him. I wonder if that gives you, if you're the Knicks, more negotiating power at the extension table this offseason or not. But I go back and forth. I think right at this particular second, my inclination is to say, let him hit restricted free agency with a heavy inclination towards re-signing him. But like, there is a part of me that also wants to lock him in. I guess it would depend on what the number is. Like anything, it's so tough to say. Like there's still that hump to get over when you're talking about contracts now, of understanding what the cap is now and like what a normal contract is, quote unquote. And so like saying like Immanuel Quickley might get north of $20 million a year seems obscene when you remember like, oh my God, remember like 10 years ago when we were talking about like, you know, if Carmelo Anthony should get $16 million a year or something, like, and now you want to pay Quickley $20 million, except that's like pretty fair, all things considered. Like RJ Barrett is going to be making $28 million next year, or thereabouts. I think that's about what his deal averages out to over the life of it per year. And that seems pretty fair. Like Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson at around 26, 27 million a year are like huge steals, because some of their contemporaries are making like 50 mil or above at the highest range of stars in the NBA now. So it's like, it makes it tough to find that magic price tag for Quick. Like, obviously I think that there's a part of me that thinks like, yes, he's shown like every bit and then some that he can be, you know, as valuable, if not more valuable of a player than like RJ Barrett for sure. But then there are other parts of me where it's like, well, but RJ Barrett's skill set just translated to the playoffs, and he was like the second best player on the Knicks in the whole time, and Quickley really had a tough time in the playoffs before he got hurt. And, you know, how much of that was on him, how much of that was on how he was being used. It's a tough equation to get into, a tough nut to crack. But like I said, I kind of feel like my inclination right now is that I would probably let him, like, unless him and his agent are willing to come to a super team friendly deal on an extension this offseason, which would probably be like under 20 million a season over like 3 or 4 years, then I might be like, all right, well, if you want like, you know, like functionally for the Knicks, who are presumably going to be kind of capped out for a little while, like 20 million versus 25 million a season is going to make a functionally huge difference in their like cap space and stuff going forward. So if he wants to like play for it and try to get a 25 million a year contract from some other team or something, then I'm kind of inclined to say like, all right, well, if you reach that point, then we're all good at that point, because that means you're playing good enough to be a $25 million player, and we'd love to keep you for that much. So I think that's kind of where I land right now.
Yeah, I think your point on him versus RJ is an interesting one, because if I'm Immanuel Quickley's agent, I'm going into Leon Rose's office and saying, my client was a dramatically better player than RJ Barrett was for the 82 game regular season, and they were not in the same universe offensively or defensively. And then Leon would maybe answer like, all right, but when it really mattered, like RJ's game translated much better to the playoffs. And I think we're going to talk about it in some of the mailbag episodes we have coming up this week. I don't think that I think the regular season was much more representative of who Immanuel Quickley is in the postseason is. And sometimes you do see players get exposed in the postseason and their game doesn't translate. I don't think that's applicable to Quickley because the defense didn't fall off in the slightest. And we're looking at someone who, I mean, statistically was a top 10 defender in the NBA in terms of shooting percentage when he was the closest defender, the effect that he had on the Knicks in terms of on-off differential in the NBA, on-off differential when he's on the floor, off the floor, I think led the NBA this season. So we're talking about a guy who probably should have been a candidate for an all-defensive team. And if he replicates this performance a year from now, will again be a candidate for an all-defensive team. And then when he was a starting point guard, when the ball was put in his hands, what did he put up? Like 24, 5 and 5 a game on pretty decent efficiency. Like that is the profile of a guy who is in the all-star conversation every year. And I know part of the difference is wings are just scarcer than guards are, right? And that is just kind of the nature of NBA basketball at this point. That's why someone like RJ, even with a lot unproven, could get that kind of contract on top of the fact that he was the third pick. And there is a little bit of a bump inherent to that. Alex, I don't know. I'll throw a number at you. I know you just said under 20 million, but I think something like 4 years for 88 million would be a pretty fair deal. I think if Quickley came in and played the way he did during the regular season, the playoffs, he could have reasonably made a demand that like, I want to be paid like close to $30 million a year. And the Knicks would have had to think about it. If I'm the Knicks, I'm jumping on the fact that he didn't and trying to get a good deal out of this.
Yeah, I think 4 for 88 would be fine. You know, like I said, like I would love to get him around 20, but 20 again, I just said functionally, what really is the difference between like 25 million a year and like 20 million a year?
Yeah, and that's
Not
20, that's 22. It's not crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, 22 is not, I mean, that's functionally about the same as a $20 million a year contract. So if you're treating the player a little better, which goes a long way, I wouldn't be mad at that at all. I think another thing we should consider is that 22 million is, I mean, if you're looking at this from the perspective of, and we're going to be talking about this a ton this whole offseason, I'm sure, like from the perspective of if the Knicks make a big swing trade at some point, that's a fantastic building block salary on a young player who's getting better every year. You know, to start a trade on. Like now you don't have to be like, crap, we have to find some salary flotsam like Evan Fournier, you know, to like attach all these dudes to. And now we're like paying extra because we're sending flotsam in this deal. Now you could be like, well, you know, you can have Immanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett or whatever, and that gets you to your 50 million for this megastar, you know, to execute this trade. Yep. So yeah, I could get with that number for sure. I wouldn't be mad at it. Like if
the only counter there is like, and this is just to not to interrupt you, but just to get at exactly what you're saying here. Like, if you're Leon Rose, are you looking at Immanuel Quickley as a player for the New York Knicks or an asset? Like, do you see him and Brunson as a long-term fit? Do you see him, Brunson, Grimes, and RJ as a long-term fit? Like those guys playing 1 through 4 potentially, and you being undersized at every single spot on the floor, because that doesn't seem tenable. And if you're paying Immanuel Quickley that money, like, can he come off the bench for 4 years when he's expressed a desire to one day be a starter? And does he see a future for himself in New York where he's a starter one day? And does that mean moving Quentin Grimes? So like I think there's a bunch of stuff to consider when extending him. But for me, just, and I don't like looking at players this way, but like when you're talking about it, like critically, just as an asset, I don't think you can even like risk losing this guy in a year for nothing.
Yeah. Oh, definitely not. And, you know, even if he hits restricted free agency, I think you go into it with the mindset of we're going to match whatever some team offers you. You know, it's just going to be a Jeremy Lin situation, but where you actually keep the guy, where you just be like, if you think this is what your market is, go find someone to sign you to that deal, and then we'll match it. It's sort of like what happened with like DeAndre Ayton last year, for example, although hopefully it would be less contentious than that.
Yeah, better result after.
Yeah. Better playoff performance for sure. But yeah, so I basically long and the short of it, I would not be mad at a 4 for 88 deal. I would not be mad if they let him hit restricted free agency next year. in this case, I sort of just kind of trust whatever they want to do as far as the Knicks are concerned. But it ultimately, if they did sign him to about 20 to 22 million, I think that's a good number. I literally am like talking myself into it as we're recording here. Like that's like a really good number for if you view him more as a building block for a future trade, or if you view him as a guy that you want to help build the team around going forward. I think that's a pretty solid number either way.
Yeah, I'm with you. And if you think you are good with numbers, there's a place you can go to and make some money off of that if you're also a sports fan, because PrizePicks is now offering a new $1 million daily Superflex promotion. Every day of the NBA playoffs/finals, one PrizePicks users will get a chance at being a millionaire. One entry placed after 8 a.m. EST will be randomly selected each day. Whoever places that entry will be given a 6-pick flex with the following payouts: 6 correct picks, $1 million; 5 correct picks, 80,000, still not bad; 4 correct picks, 16,000. Full details can be found at prizepicks.com/a million. You must opt in at this link to be eligible for the $1 million entry. Once you opt in, all you have to do is play the game like normal, and you could be the lucky winner. But PrizePicks also offers their normal play, where if you're like me, maybe you're throwing some money down in Game 4 on Jamal Murray getting over 24 points, or Nikola Jokic having over 11.5 assists. Because if you pick 2 to 6 players and they go score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. And the beauty of it is it's just you versus the projections available. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, with that, we are back on Locked On Knicks, and we talked about Immanuel Quickley. Now we got to talk about his running mate, Obi Toppin. Alex, do you extend him? Do you trade him? What are the Knicks going to do with Obi?
Yeah, this is a much a much harder question, I feel like, and I feel like the Quickley question is even a little bit hard in itself. But Obi is even harder, I think, because of who plays in front of him, and also that thought, like what you said, of like, you know that this guy has X amount of talent, and it would be a real shame to lose him for below what he's worth, like what you know that he could be worth, or just straight up lose him for nothing. If you end up letting him walk in restricted free agency or something. I don't know. I would probably look to trade him if some team was willing to go for it. Like, you marked down the Pacers in here, and I think that's intriguing for sure. I think that, like, if you could trade Obi and maybe try to get into that 7th pick somehow of this upcoming draft, I think that's a good way to sort of, and look, I don't know that it would be a 1-to-1 swap or anything even close to that. You probably have to pay at least one of the future protected picks or something to make that happen. But go get a player that functionally is similar but maybe better, like we've talked about enough, like Taylor Hendricks or something like that. I think he's a player that potentially fits what the Knicks need out of that roster spot a little better, in the fact that he can protect the rim a little better, he can shoot the 3 a little better, that sort of thing. Maybe you do that. I think, unfortunately, if you're going to commit to Julius Randle long term, and that's a whole other story which we already talked about on a previous episode, so like you can go back and listen to that, like, for thoughts on that if you're listening to this. But like, if you're going to commit to Julius Randle long term, I just don't see how you can be like, yeah, let's keep Obi Toppin through this next year, like all the way through, and see him through to restricted free agency. Because then, what are you going to pay this guy, like, even $16 million a year or something to, like, come off the bench for 10 minutes a game? Like, that's just a really poor use of cap money. It's really not fair to Obi, who's going to have a shorter prime window than most players because he came into the league so old. Like, he's only probably going to have like 5-6 more years, like once he signs his rookie extension or restricted free agent contract or what have you, like, to really make something happen for himself in the NBA, because then he'll already be in his 30s because he came to the league at 23 years old. So yeah, I don't know. I guess, short of if you're going to trade Julius Randle, and try to upgrade the roster in a meaningful way that way, I can't see a world where you should probably keep Obi, as much as that stinks, because I freaking love the guy and I love how he plays basketball. And I think he is easily the most electric player on the team in terms of just like pure athleticism and wow plays. And honestly, one of the only guys on the team that like consistently plays above the rim, which is a valuable skill in the NBA.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would love to try and go get that 7th pick. I think Indiana would be insane to give it up. Not even as an indictment on Obi, but just given their timeline. But they've kind of essentially told people around the league that they want to make the playoffs next year and they want to build around Tyrese Haliburton now. And they have never in the history of their franchise been interested in an extended rebuild. So I put into our little doc here, like something along the framework of Obi plus the Knicks 2024 first, plus the Mavs 2024 first as a deal that could potentially get it done if the Pacers think Obi is like a little bit more ready than someone like Taylor Hendricks to come in and play. And like with Halliburton's passing, Obi's ability to run the floor, Obi's shooting, like that could be a pretty good fit. I just think the Knicks need someone who is a higher level defender is that spot. If you're theoretically like, because I think the premise of this, let me know if you disagree. The premise of moving off of Obi is that if you're going to one day move off of Julius Randle, even if it's not this summer, even if it's just at the end of his contract, like you want someone who's a little bit better of a two-way player and a little bit better of a shooter than Obi Toppin replacing him.
Yeah, and that's where the whole Hendricks idea comes in, right? Or
exactly.
like, and just in that general 7 range too. Let's say Hendricks like crushes it, in workouts or something, and works his way into the top 5. Like, there's always that player every year, usually from a small school, which he's from, whatever. So maybe he'll like wow some people and get up into the top 5 or something, and then some other guys will fall. So like, there's some power forwards that could potentially be in that range this year that could potentially give you what you're looking for there, or at least like bigger forwards that maybe aren't like traditional power forwards, but are, in the mold of a modern NBA, like 3-4, tweener type guy, which it could work as well, as long as they're big enough to get rebounds going forward. So yeah, I think especially the consistency of shooting thing is big. Like, as much as I want Obi to be a consistent shooter, and like he started this year off like on fire, like he was shooting like over 40% for a large part of the early part of this year, and things were looking great. And then all of a sudden it just kind of fell off a cliff. And, it's a consistent problem with a lot on the roster, but also with him, where it's like, he'll go from everything looking like he's like Steph Curry, like this perfect arcing, beautiful shot, to then, as Clyde might say, just UFOs all day. Like, you think there's an alien invasion going on, just everywhere, all over the court, just not anywhere near the hoop. And you start to wonder like why this guy's taking like 5-6 threes in a short amount of time when he's on the floor.
And look, he only shot 30% from 3 in the playoffs. Like, obviously he had some good games, had the one game he started, he went 4 for 11 against the Heat. But as we talked about in that episode, like there's a reason he got up 11 threes. Like, Miami was like, let him shoot. Like, he is not treated by NBA teams as a shooter. And there are games, there are performances where you're like, all right, maybe that's wrong. And look, he made some big shots. Like, I don't want to go revisionist history here in like a negative way on Obi. Like, he made some really big shots for this team in the playoffs, had some game-changing possessions. I even thought in game 6 against the Heat, like he had some good moments, like when he attacked Duncan Robinson off the dribble. The fact of the matter is, though, like his ability to rim run isn't going to be actualized on the Knicks. I don't even know if it's ever going to be like fully actualized in the NBA. I think a creative coach, and as we've always said, if he played with a stretch 5, like there's certainly more you can do there, but he's not a rim protector. And like, he needs to play with someone, again, who can like guard the rim and can shoot the basketball a little bit. Like, if you want to play in that style and on that type of team, like in that type of format, like if you put him on like Milwaukee somehow, like with Brook Lopez, or like, I can't even, like Jokic, for example, like I think there's a world where he's a monster, like offensively. And he puts up 20 points per game, and you see his passing and you see his shooting and you see what he's worked on off the dribble. I just, with Tom Thibodeau and without a stretch 5, like, I don't think that's ever going to be on the Knicks. And like, I want to set Obi free. Like, I want to send him off somewhere where he can go be that person, because like there's a special player in there, but I think it's going to take a very specific situation to unlock it. And the rigidity of the Knicks is not necessarily that. All right. Let's get to Rokas Jokubiatis in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks. All right. We are back on Locked On Knicks. Alex, I'm going to hand the floor. Can you hand the floor? You got to be really strong. Over to you. the mic maybe. You've done a deep dive on him. You're a big fan. What should the Knicks do with Rokas Jokubiatis? Should he be part of their future plans?
Yeah, I don't know to call myself an expert, but I did go down a rabbit hole the other day of watching some Jokubiatis videos. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what ended up happening, I was actually gonna say, when you said hand the floor, it's like better than smacking the floor with your face like Rokas did the other day.
Maybe that's why it was already incepted into my head that like I associate this guy with that.
That was actually what put me down the rabbit hole the other day, to be honest, because I was like, oh yeah, like this dude exists, and like I want to watch some more of him and see where he's at. But yeah, Rokas like intrigues me a bit. You know, I was watching some of his better games, and look, like that's a slippery slope to do when you're watching prospects. You know, like watching their best games is sometimes less beneficial than watching their worst games. So certainly his stats overall will not like knock your socks off. Like he plays in the ACB league, which is like the Spanish like top league for Barcelona, which is one of the best teams in the ACB. However, had sort of a statistical downturn this year, even though he only had a marginal increase in shot attempts and things of that nature. Last year for Barcelona, shot 50.5% overall, 43% from three on 1.6 attempts per game, shot 72% from the free throw line, averaged 7.6 points, 2.9 assists in 17.5 minutes. I think we've mentioned from over there before, like guys in Europe, it's a lot harder to crack the rotation. It's a lot. He'd probably feel right at home on a Tibbs team. It's hard to crack a rotation as a young player in Europe. They're very much like you got to play and kind of cut your teeth for 5 or so years kind of place. And then maybe when you hit your mid-20s, you can start getting consistent minutes, unless you're like a literal prodigy like Luka Doncic. But then this year averaged roughly the same like counting stats, a little bit more in the assist category, 1 more assist per game this year. But about the same amount of points, 7.7, but his percentages did go down to 44% from the field and 32% from three on about 2 attempts per game. So it took a little bit more in the 3-pointer department, but made them about quite a bit less per amount of the time, almost 10 points less, which isn't great. That said, Gavin, when I watch him, and you know, I wanted to put this in the Quickley and Obi episode for a reason, mostly for the Quickley part. When you watch him, I feel like on offense, and you know, the defense would be a whole other thing entirely, but on offense, when I watch Jokubiatis play, I think to myself, like, he kind of does a lot of things similar to Quickley in the sense that he's able to break a defense down. He's a great passer, honestly. Like when you watch some of his games where he's had like a decent number of assists, like you can really see it shine through. Like when he's empowered to sort of like run the offense and go out there and create looks for his teammates, he is just great at just throwing a frozen rope to a guy in the corner or whipping a pass to a guy inside. He shows, even if it hasn't fully actualized yet, obviously, like I said, those 3-point numbers were less than fantastic, but he's shown the ability to create pull up, you know, opportunities for himself and shoot off of screens and also move a little bit without the ball. Because again, you know, in Europe, you're kind of expected to sort of learn a little bit of everything. And that includes off ball movement and everything else. All that said, like, I wonder if maybe having him waiting in the wings, potentially able to come over if a void were there in the Knicks roster, like for some backup point guard minutes. Because he sort of said, and the Knicks have sort of said, like, why would we bring him over if there's not a role for him? He's getting great experience in Europe right now, playing for Barcelona, like literally the premier program over there. So why would you bring him over a second sooner than you have to? But like, this is a kid that won the Rising Stars Award last year, which traditionally, well, I looked at it before we started recording and we talked about it, a little bit of a mixed bag, but some really great players have won that award. Probably about 50% of the time you get at least a functional NBA player of guys that have won that award. But you know, I think that it could soften the blow a bit if you do go big star hunting this offseason and potentially bring him in and slot him into the role that would be vacated if you would use Immanuel Quickley in a trade for one of those guys.
Yeah, and even if Quickley's on the team, like down the road, it just kind of depends on roster construction. Because again, if there's a role, like let's just say Grimes is traded for like a star wing at some point, or in a package for a star wing, and you're playing Quickley and Brunson as your backcourt, like maybe Rokas is then like the 15 minutes a game backup point guard. And look, I'm not like, I haven't seen a ton of him. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on his game. I do think it's a little bit concerning that his stats in EuroLeague at least like way fell off from last year. Like last year he shot 58% from the field and 50, not really sustainable on a very small number of attempts, to be clear. Just 1 3 a game, but 57% from three. This year's 41% from the field, 43% from three, at least in EuroLeague play. Again, he's taking 4 or 5 shots a game. So like I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to read too much into that, but you'd like to see a linear progression there, particularly in terms of his efficiency. And I guess the counterpoint to that is like a lot of times you see players scoring explode in the NBA relative to EuroLeague. Like obviously part of it was that he was a teenager, but even Luka Doncic was only putting up like, I think like 16 or 17 points per game in EuroLeague. And then 2 years into his NBA career is a 30-point scorer. And it's just part of the style of play there. So I say all that to say, like, I could see him as like a pretty ideal backup point guard in a couple of seasons. I think he's a great asset for the Knicks. I don't think it's something to think about next year unless the Knicks make like a really significant consolidation trade. But to your point, maybe that is the ultimate luxury of him, is that we know we have this guy in the bag if we do want to make this trade and we do want to give up a bunch of guys. Like the Knicks have the luxury of depth there and the fact that they're confident in their ability to draft and find guys in the second round.
Yeah, what's nice too about him is that he's only 22 years old right now. So they drafted him pretty young. Like I think when they drafted him, he was 20, which, you know, is some freshmen that come out of college are that age. So
Yeah.
even if he takes some time to sort of get some seasoning over in Europe and you maybe even wait another year, he still comes over and he's still like the age of like an old draft pick. Like this almost like having the rights to a guy when he was a college freshman and then being able to bring him in when he's a senior, after he's gained more experience and grown his game there versus, you know, growing it in an NBA environment where it can be a little more cutthroat. And, you know, we've seen various guys in the past like come in, not be ready for the NBA and then really look poor and then, you know, struggle to ever really put it together because it just kind of got off on such a bad foot. To your point too, you know, if Luka and other guys are any indication, maybe that just means we can pencil him in as like a 17-point per game score, which would be pretty nice. But yeah, I mean, I like the idea of bringing him over. I would be really curious to see if he'd be willing to come over for Summer League again this year, because I think that would be beneficial to get another look at his game. I do remember the last time he was over for Summer League, I think it was 2 years ago. He didn't come over this past year. But when he came over the first time, I thought was like, things look a little rough with this guy. Like, I don't know. Like, because I was 2021 Summer League, if I'm not mistaken. And I was like, first couple games, I was like, man, it seems like he's like 3 steps behind everybody on the floor right now. And this is only Summer League. But by the end, we were like, oh, you know what? I think he's kind of figured things out here. Like, things look pretty good. Except for the end for him was like 3 games because he only played a few games and then just went back to Europe.
Yeah.
So,
Can I throw
I'd love
out?
to see more. Yeah.
I think I was thinking the same thing as you, and you might have a clearer memory of it. And I realize this is, I'm going to come out as very Europhobic here, but I was conflating, well, not even Europhobic, I guess international phobic, because I was conflating him with Luka Vildoza a little bit, who was terrible that Summer League.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, like Rokas, like he definitely, like, maybe I'm only thinking the good stuff. Like it's hard to remember 2 Summer Leagues ago, but he had some really good moments for sure when he was playing.
He did by the end. I remember the very first game. This is why I remember it, because the first game I remember we got on and I was like, oh boy, it's a good thing they're not bringing him over this year. Like he needs a little more time, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, nuh-uh, like he's going to take some time in Europe because it's not going to work right now. Like he's so far behind, but literally like we saw in real time, I think he played 3 games in Summer League that year. And by like the 3rd game, he was like the best player, or like almost the best player for the minutes he was on the floor. And I was like, oh, all right, well, this is promising. Like, this looks good now. It looks like he figured out the speed of the game. He understands, especially Summer League is like, just like run. And I think he kept wanting to like set up and like run things. And that just like doesn't happen as much in Summer League. It's just like quick actions and just like bang, 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 bang. Because they're essentially just like, it's like guys
it's glorified pickup.
Yeah. Guys that just got drafted trying to score a bunch and guys that don't have contracts yet trying to show out and earn contracts, and that's it. It's that kind of environment. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if maybe he comes over this year. I think it would be interesting though. I think he's an interesting player to not forget about. Let's just put it that way, and to keep in the back of our minds in case something happens, or even if the Knicks just go draft pick list this year and they're like, oh, we want some new blood in here this year. I don't know how interested Jokubiatis or the Knicks would be in making that happen, considering Quickley and Deuce and all these other guys are on the roster already that should presumably get minutes above him. But stranger things have happened. Maybe he comes over and then eventually gets his moment and shines and whatever. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, this concludes our big questions episodes. So hopefully you guys enjoyed these. Now we're going to get into big questions from you guys. So the rest of this week, we're going to do some mailbag questions. We'll do them as long as you guys keep asking them. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask them in the YouTube comments. If you're here on YouTube, ask them to us on Twitter, either in DMs or in reply to the tweet we sent out, or in reply to any tweet that we put out. Who cares? Just, if you ask a question, just say like, hey, mailbag question for you. We'll definitely try to get to it. But yeah, we're excited to get into those in the rest of the episodes this week. But till next time, thank you guys all for listening, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Peace out.